Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Interlinked, the official podcast of Neo Tokyo, powered by Shrapnel.
Brace yourself for impact, crypto gamers. I am reporting from the sacrifice zone. STX 3.2 dates have just been announced, and it's going to be going down from July 25th to July 30th. Make sure to block off your calendars so you don't miss out on those mission rewards. These missions come in two different types, ones that earn you Shrap and ones that earn you weapon skins. These missions could be getting a certain amount of kills with a specific weapon, or extracting with a certain amount of weapon skin fragments or Sigma, and you'll want to complete these missions as the prize pool for 3.2 is 1 million Shrap. And if you just can't get enough Shrap, pick up an operator NFT, as holders are going to get 50% of that million Shrap pool. Huge shout out to our sponsor, Playa3ull Games. They are inspired by gamers and funded by their community. They have a epic game on the Epic Games Store, a third-person shooter called Nexus. Hop on in there and check that out. They're also currently selling nodes, so if you're interested, check that out at their website, playable.games. That is a 3 instead of a B on Playable. Now strap in for the rest of this episode of Interlinked.
Today, we have a legendary gentleman from Sipher, one of probably the most exciting projects to come out. Really excited to do a deep dive. As always, I am joined by the most legendary co-host of all time, Mr. Nicholas. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Ready to dive into Sipher. Stoked to be talking some crypto gaming on this Friday.
So, welcome to the show. And I know your handle is Peak, so let's peek over those mountains of bear market town and let's peek over into the alpha and to the next stage of the bull market. I would really love to, first of all, welcome you to the show, but also love to get a foundation on Sipher and just do a full deep dive. What is it? How did it get here? What's the story? We want to hear everything. So would love to just do a full deep dive into the project.
Yeah, awesome. So first of all, thank you guys for having me. For those of you who don't know, I am Peak. So I'm basically one of the founding team of Sipher. So we launched our first collection basically 3 years ago. And very early on, we knew right away that, okay, we think that the end game for NFTs is gaming, right? Like we found it very difficult to play that like social club kind of NFT projects. Like to us, that was very hard for us, right? We just didn't have the capital for it. Like we don't have the competition for it. So we settled very early on to do a game, and we love like RPGs and roguelikes, right? So we end up settling on something which is basically a cross between Diablo and Hades, if you guys know that. So an ARPG with, roguelike elements in it. And part of the reason why we went this like ARPG route is also, we believe that to have NFTs be useful, they need to be integrated with your game, right? So you need to have this like vibrant game economy, and ARPGs, tend to have very good game economies. But happy to deep dive into that later. So once again, I'm Peak, and thank you guys for having me.
Right on. And we are also joined by the other legendary co-host, Mr. Jared Bradley. How are you, sir?
Doing great. Sorry I'm late. Thanks for having me today, guys. I'm excited to talk about Sipher.
Yeah, all good. Let's jump in. So yeah, look, we have long form time. Got the full hour here, Peak. So yeah, would love to just jump in more. So you mentioned the mix of like Diablo and Hades, ARPG, all this super fun. Maybe you could just kind of dive a little bit deeper on just kind of your thoughts on the core game loop, your perspective on core game loops in general. Like, what about that is compelling? How'd you really dive into it? Did you kind of re-architect anything, or was it like, this is great from here, this is great from here, let's synthesize? Like, how did that all really come together?
Okay, I think that's a great question. So basically, very early on, when we first, looked at what kind of game should we make, right? Like we knew right away we were never gonna do, and like we would never have the capability to do like an MMORPG, right? Like that's just dead in the water. We don't have the bandwidth for it. We don't have the experience for it. And we looked at what value can you get from minimal work, right? Like as in like what value can you generate from like the least assets generated possible, right? And at the time, roguelikes were, really coming to the popularity. They still are. And a big reason why they were so popular for indie devs, right, is because you make your base game, you make all these roguelike elements, and players generate so much replayability from these different combinations of things that can happen in game, right? Which is that like exponential value / entertainment creation that we thought of, right? And the next step on top of that is then how do you get the item gate loop, right? Because if you just do like a typical roguelike right now, like Hades, right? You can't really have NFTs, like if everybody has the same items generated from the single player game, NFTs and trading just don't really work, right? Like there's no trading in Dead Cells, there's no trading in Hades. I'm just rattling off roguelike names here, right? So which is why we really came to the idea of, okay, we need to have an ARPG element, right? So an element where you play the game, as you level up, you get stronger and stronger gear, and as a requirement for this for you getting stronger and stronger, right? We create different challenges. So maybe a certain dungeon is very hard for single player, maybe a certain dungeon is very hard for multiplayer, single hit, multi hit, right? And that's that. So the goal for that is that creates a very deep kind of meta demand where, okay, a player always has to constantly change what items they need, what characters they need, and that creates that demand that you need to have for a successful like Web3 economy. And to cap it off, like this is what we thought was like the most viable way for us to reach an economy that makes sense, because the only other one, like I said, is like a proper like EVE Online World of Warcraft economy, and we're not going to be able to do that like at all successfully, right? Hence we did something like this.
And I'd love to get a little bit more around your background, how you started your Web3 journey, how you ended up building out this Sipher ecosystem, just so that we have a nice foundation for the rest of the discussion.
Yeah, so it was basically during COVID. So my brother, the original founder of Sipher, was who got me into like Web3, right? And at the time, I'm a big gamer, so I sink so much money into all these different video games, right? And so the selling point of like, oh, hey, like, wouldn't it be nice if all this money you spent on a video game, you could resell it, right? Like the same way that way back when, if you had Xbox CDs, you would resell a CD, right? Or in a partial way, like you could resell like CS:GO skins, right? But still is like for mobile games that just doesn't exist at all. So I do believe that should be like the standard moving forward, but we haven't reached anywhere closer in terms of adoption, right? So, but that's the background. So during the end of COVID, basically middle end of COVID.
And then walk us through sort of your brother founding the game, and then I guess bringing you on board. Where'd you start? What was that sort of like onboarding journey like? I know also, I've been following you guys since really I just got into Web3 gaming, which was right around 2021. Actually, found you guys not long after. So you've really been through the ringer of the highs and lows of the last, super metaverse cycle, obviously the bear, and now in, whatever range bound nonsense we're in now. So I'd love to get some of your perspective on what that journey was like for both you and Sipher.
So when we first, to be honest, right, when we first launched the first collection, which was the 10,000 ears, right, the dog characters that we have right now, we were leaning into gaming, but we just weren't sure yet, right? We weren't sure. Like we're just like, oh, everyone's dropping a collection. Like we should drop a collection too. Like we have good ideas. But then once we launched the collection, like we really thought about it. We're like, okay, like Axie's doing really well, and we believe that gaming is the way to go for these kind of NFT projects, right? And the nice thing is with Axie laid the groundwork for like Axie made a lot of mistakes so that we could learn, right? And I'm very thankful to them for that, right? Because they were the first ones that did it. Like they had a huge number of players. They're basically the first proper Web3 project. But Axie showed us that what not to do, and also I think at the time I was still very Web2 focused, right? So I would like to believe that I had a good sense on what had actual proper potential in Web3. Because, like back then, like people were really into like, oh, guilds are going to be the next big thing, guilds that farm Web3 games, that's going to be a big thing. Or, like metaverses, like land is going to be a big thing. And for our team, we were very lucky. We just kind of like, we just don't see it. Like we don't see how these things are going to work out properly. So which is why we stayed away from them, right? We didn't do any metaverse stuff. We didn't do any guild stuff. And we're just like, okay, game, item economy, go. And we would do that for 3 years, essentially.
And then can you give us a good idea of where the game is currently in its present state? So, today, I'm like blanking on what today is, the end of August. Where is Sipher living right now?
Yeah, so we have a playable product right now. We just had our first play the Airdrop season, but that season did well. But that's still not the complete build yet. So in the middle of September, or maybe the end of September, depending on bugs and all that. So I don't know when is this related to release / go out this podcast?
This will go out Tuesday, this upcoming
Tuesday. Okay. So basically, next month or this coming month, we're going to have the full global open beta. So we're gonna have a lot more features, a lot more gameplay, a lot more economy features. It's not going to be a global launch yet. By that I mean we're not going to be doing any advertising for it yet, because we still have to make sure that the metrics are good, that the product is good, it doesn't crash, right? But so we are at like I would say step 95 of like the launch and like a final complete product. So I'm very excited, and this is a good time to find out about Sipher / get into Sipher if you haven't heard about it already.
And will that open beta coincide with the second Play to Airdrop season, or?
The open beta will launch a bit early first, because like I said, we're still testing, and then the second Play to Airdrop season is coming very soon afterwards. But it's not going to be like on the dot, like open beta and then Play to Airdrop. Play to Airdrop is more going to be synced around our global launch, because that's why we're going to be putting a lot of money into like organic as well as paid advertisements for the game, right? So better to do the boost together, one push together.
And maybe you can jump into some of the lore and just the inspiration for the design and the characters and like the world building, because I think that's a really interesting thing that y'all do very, very well.
Yeah.
And the characters are very, very fun. So maybe just deep dive.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you. So if you can tell, it's actually a combination of like Asian and Western culture, right? So you've got this like cyberpunk vest, like like purple neon kind of aesthetic for the first world. That's not gonna carry over for the next world. But if you look at the characters from the game, it's actually very Asian, because they're animals from the zodiac, right? Like the 12 zodiac animals that cycle. So that's why we did the dog first, because at the time, like dogs are cute, people like dogs, but we're working through the zodiac now. So the first three characters are going to be the dog, the cat, and then the bull. And then afterwards we have okay, let me remember which one is cleared for announcement. We have the mouse, which is like the next one, and then we have two more after that. So we really did this kind of like, okay, like Asian, but with this Western twist of like sci-fi, futuristic, like rebirth kind of thing. So this was like more from my brother from Tin Side, but I yeah, that's the general summary of it.
And what's the team like that you guys are working with now, and kind of where are they focused on, who's dealing with marketing, and kind of go through the team and how you found them?
Yeah, so okay, let me work through it. But basically at the start, the team was very small, and then about 5-10 people, right? And then we reached out, so Sid basically did a podcast, in like a Vietnamese podcast, but basically explaining, hey, we're doing this Web3 game, we think Web3 gaming is cool. And then luckily, because of that, a current Web2 product manager, and our current game like head of product, right? He saw it, he was like, okay, cool. Like, I like this idea. And the thing about Vietnam, where our team is based, is that we do a lot of outsourcing work, right? So a lot of the people here, they don't get to work on stuff that they think is fun. They get to work on stuff that other people tell them to do, right? So when the opportunity came along to finally be like, hey, we're gonna do a Vietnamese game, to a Western audience, but it's going to be a Vietnamese team, and you actually have input on what the game's going to be. A lot of people were on board with that, so we brought in the head of game product first, and with his experience, we were able to flesh out the game, right? So we went from a team of 5 to 10 to now we basically have 160, 170 people across 3 offices, and luckily, because we're in Vietnam, the salaries are a bit lower, hence why our team is so large, right? So the majority of them are in Ho Chi Minh. So I would say that the majority of the team is on the game dev side, right? I would say like 50%, no, 70-80% of the team is on game dev side. Game dev here is in like the coding, the game design, as well as like the art. And then aside from that, you have your marketing team. So that's split into like organic Web3 marketing, but also you have your more typical mobile marketing. And mobile marketing is just like, how many ads does it cost me to get a user? This user earns me $10. How many ads should I run? And that's like a big thing for mobile games, right? And then you've got your, like metaverse and crypto and like tech team, but that's like a smaller team. So I would say 80 is like focus around the game, and 20 is like the supporting, like marketing, crypto, et cetera, et cetera.
I'd love to hop back to that, the first Play to Airdrop campaign. You mentioned that was successful. Would love to know what were some of the metrics for success that you guys had determined going into it that you were looking for, and what were some of the big takeaways for that Play to Airdrop campaign?
Yep. So the biggest takeaway that I have, okay, sorry. So in Play to Airdrop, of course, the main thing is to get downloads, is to get more users, right? So for Play to Airdrop Season 1, when our global launch wasn't ready yet, we obviously had more optimistic timelines of Play to Airdrop. Like the original timeline was Play to Airdrop 1 was finished and then global launch. But you guys know like game development, it's hard if these things get delayed all the time. So we had to stagger the timeline. But we still got a lot of organic players coming in. And but our numbers look like, our numbers with Play are very good. So now they're like slowing down. And then during the global launch, when we kick off the organic marketing and kick off the Play to Airdrop Season 2, we expect like a big bump, and we'll take our learnings of Season 1 and put it on Season 2, right? The biggest takeaway I had for Play to Airdrop is how much a Play to Airdrop re-incentivizes the game, and also how much it affects player enjoyment, right? So we had this PvP game mode that a lot of our community enjoyed, and they liked it, and then we said, hey, we're testing it, and it's fun, right? So obviously the team wants to do a PvP game. But once during the first week of the Play to Airdrop, we actually linked the winnings of that PvP mode to your Play to Airdrop points, right? And that led to such a stark decline in like community toxicity and community positivity, because people were like, every issue became, oh, I just lost money because of lag. I just lost money because of this. Or this person is abusing this bug, so I lost money because they cheated, right? And I noticed like the community went from like very good vibes to just instantly like, oh my God, like what's going on, right? So we instantly took that off, and we're like, okay, we'll make Play to Airdrop Season 1 focus around playing the game only, and there's not going to be any win-lose, right? And that fixed it a lot. But that was the biggest learning that I had from that. Just how much it turned, how much it affected like sentiment and the relationship to the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good point. We've noticed it in the Neo Tokyo Discord, or at least I have, around the engage bot. So, these sort of engage bots which promote like liking and commenting. But then next thing you know, it doesn't take many days for people to be like, hey, I watched that, or I retweeted that, and I'm down a point. And like now that knocked me out of the leaders. I'm like, we're talking about a couple of bucks, but people become, once you put dollars and cents to it, the mental math completely changes.
Yes. Especially when the mental math is speculative, right? Because people don't know when this token drops, how much they're going to get, right? So some people, they think they're going to lose $10. Some people, they think they lost $1,000, which I'm not going to blame them for that, right? Like that's a very fair thought to have. But that's the biggest learning I have from Season 1, and I'm going to apply for Season 2, which is you have to design the Play to Airdrop in such a way that people like the fact that more people join the Play to Airdrop. Whereas Season 1, that was one of our biggest mistakes. The more people join, the less the cred people have. So they're like, oh, I don't want more people to join, right? That's the kind of funny thing.
Well, I think that is a really... Oh, go ahead, Nick. I'm sorry.
No, please hop in.
I was going to say that sort of shows the entire space and how gamified it is, and how ready the space is for, any small thing that pops out there. Like, I'm going to gamify this. I'm going to figure out whether or not I want to be in first, whether more people want to come in. And then it builds this like sort of tension, sometimes positive, but like you said, sometimes the vibes, like people get really, really angry about it. And I was wondering if you could sort of talk about that and the evolution of your community and how you guys decided to grow it, and how y'all are continually sort of, fertilizing that to, keep people engaged, and what's the plan for that?
So I think that right now we're going through something that every game project will go through sooner or later. And I think it's where every game project has fucked up, including us. Not sure if I can swear, sorry, has messed up, including us. Which
You
is
surely
that...
can.
Oh, thank you.
All good.
Which is that you now, during your initial mint, your initial push of this vision of the game, you sold the vision to essentially what are investors. I believe that your game will do well, so therefore I am now in on your assets, right? So I'm not, like you're not buying a stock, but like I'm in on these characters that you're gonna have. I'm in on these gear that you're gonna have. And I believe that on some level that when this game launches and more people come in, then these assets will have value, right? Will have more value than I bought them for. Obviously, in a perfect world, there's a lot more value, but like in the worst case scenario, you at least want them to have the same amount of monetary value people bought in for, right? Depending on what your game does. And to get this on any level, you need to get organic web. Sorry. To get this, you can either do two things. You can do the Web3 OG Axie route, which is essentially a pyramid scheme, right? Which is you come in, you farm, and you farm for the next layer of people. And that's already been proven to not work. So I'm just going to put that aside. But yes, that is something you can do. And the the way that works, or the way that's supposed to work, or is sustainable, is that you need to get people that play the game and are spending money because they like the game and they don't care about the fact that they've spent the money, right? So you need organic people who are playing the game to spend money. The problem is you've already cultivated this community of people who are so profit driven, and you need to find a way to grow this community to now people who do not care about profit but care about the status of the game, right? The gameplay, the bugs, the fun of the game. And not to say that there isn't overlap, right? There are people who there are members of my community who are so insightful about the state of the game, but they also care about the economy and the money and et cetera, right? So this becomes a really big hump into getting more players to join your game or to join your like community or your Discord community, right? So either you need to find a way to merge these two and like get them to play along nicely, or maybe the route is just you just segregate, right? Maybe you have this Twitter community that is investor focused and you have this Discord community that is gaming focused. I don't know the way yet, right? But you need to find a way to not let this Web3 monetary push / demand affect the growth of the organic Web2 community. And that's something that we're trying to navigate right now. And I think that's something that every Web3 game has dealt with so far. And I've not seen a good answer for it yet. I've not seen a good, successful project for this yet.
Yeah, we were discussing that on an AMA last night, this push-pull between, what you need to do to make it adaptable to the Web2 audience sometimes pisses off the Web3 audience.
100%.
And it's really this push-pull where in the early days, particularly in the first cycle, companies benefited tremendously from leaning into the Web3 side. That's how you got sort of token pump, high valuation, set aside a bunch for the treasury if you were smart. And then sort of in the second cycle, people are, playing the two different masters of, okay, do we lean into the Web2 adoption on this cycle? Do we lean into the Web3 again to try and, I'm really starting to look at crypto as sort of the next big funding leg. You had the VC wave and all the startups that came out of that. So it really is an interesting push-pull, and totally agree that no one's really cracked that nut yet.
So just to build off your point, right? I really do believe that leaning into Web3 more than once is not sustainable. It might work during a bull run. Actually, it'll work very well during a bull run, and you've seen a lot of projects do this. But sooner or later, the hammer comes down. Sooner, like your first batch of people, they make money from the second batch from the third batch. And by the third batch, are you gonna make them money for the fourth batch? Most likely not. Like the really good projects, they did it for a very long time, and they have secured so much runway. And that's a great position to be in, right? Like I'm not gonna fault the team for securing essentially, 5 years plus of runway, and now you can actually develop the product that you want to make. And you just have to accept that some people are gonna bitch you on the way, right? But to be truly sustainable, once you have that first round of funding, once you know what your scope is, once you've developed your scope, you need to find organic liquidity now. You need to find real liquidity, not come here to make more money liquidity, because I think that's disingenuous / just not sustainable.
Absolutely.
So I kind of want to jump out and scope out a little bit, and just talking about sustainability, economy. Maybe you can take us through the whole Sipher economy. How does everything work? Give us I keep saying the deep dive, but really, I just want to go in and get the long form answer. Maybe you could just kind of bring us through that, how everything works.
So essentially the economy revolves around characters and gear, right? So to give you your more typical RPG answers, you want to get your character, you want to get your mage, your warlock, your warrior, your archer, and then you want to get the gear for them. And then you want to use those characters and gear to beat progressively more difficult content and, play in these different game modes where you get more and more rewards, right? So for the players who basically want to whale, who want to buy their way through, they say, okay, I don't want to farm my way from 1 to 50. I just want to buy the level 50 gear and join the end game right away, which is what you see a lot in the current RPGs like, WoW, Path of Exile, like the MMORPGs, right? And then as the game developer, what you do is you keep adding more content, sometimes with power creep, sometimes without power creep, right? So with an existing game, you basically, I use WoW because I think that's a common example. Everyone knows World of Warcraft. You start at level 60, and then expansion comes out, they bump the level cap to level 70, level 80. So every mobile game does something to the same extent, right? Like they basically power creep the items a little bit so people have this race for the next best thing. And you basically need to treat it like a live service game and constantly add new content to the game. So you either need to power creep your items or you need to create new game modes so that demand for new items is generated. And that is what creates the demand for all the items in the game. And that's the base Web2 layer, right? There hasn't been anything Web3 in this yet. Now, if you want to Web3 it more a bit, you can start having token rewards for winning certain game modes. You can have value accrual from spending from these different game modes to your token. And now it's more, okay, like I want to place top one on the leaderboard because I'll get this token reward. And, you know, that's basically so you build the Web2 organic economy first, and then you have the Web3 layer on top. So our team has always been a believer in that it needs to work on a fundamental, normal, non-crypto level before you then slap the crypto stuff on it.
And how have you seen that play out? Like give us the before and after of, okay, this is some of the assumptions we made, this is what we thought was going to happen. And then now that you've kind of been in it for a while, for years now, like how's everything played out?
So I would say that because we haven't been into global launch yet, our economy, I would say, is not like completely live yet, right? Like, yes, the token is live, but the interaction with the token isn't live yet. The marketplace isn't live yet because the game modes aren't all there. But I can tell you my biggest learnings and my biggest takeaways, right? If I were to do a new Web3 game right now, the biggest thing that I would implement right off the bat is a seasonal mechanic. And a seasonal mechanic is basically every 3 months, everything gets wiped back to zero. And everyone starts from zero again. Obviously, you can give the FT holders some bonus here or there, but the biggest thing that you need to deal with when it comes to Web3 economies is the constant inflation of items and how you can either deflate that or you basically just outright rotate stuff out. That's the biggest thing that everyone has to do, and you might not need to do it right away. Like if you don't do this, your game will work for about 2 years, and then eventually it catches up with you and you have to do this anyways, which is why you notice that like all of the existing ARPGs like Diablo and Path of Exile, they already do it for WoW. Like they keep bumping and then they just squeeze it, right? So if you guys play WoW, it's like they go from level 1 to 60 and then it goes up all the way to 100. It's like, okay, it's got too big, let's squeeze it down. And so now the 100 becomes 60 and we repeat. And that's basically what every Web3 game has to do. They just don't know it yet, or they know and they just haven't done it yet.
I love the idea of just old knowledge becomes new knowledge. It really goes back to this is referenced in pretty much every holy book that's available on the planet, some form of jubilee, where after 7 years or whatever the time is, in this case, it would be a quarter, all the debts, all of the items are sort of like wiped back to zero. And then you can kind of like start with a fresh start.
And the funniest thing that I think is, right, because of the way liquidity was raised, because of the way all these teams, including us, raised money leading up to the development of their game, they just don't have access to this. They're not allowed to wipe into a clean slate because they raised through NFTs, through tokens, et cetera, right? So there's still ways to work about it, but that's the awkward spot that you're in, because the nicest thing about getting a clean slate is all of your mistakes, they're wiped off the board. You don't have to do it again. But I'll use an example of like let's say Axie, right? Because that's the biggest one. But let's say they realize that, oh crap, we made a mistake making this metadata because it doesn't work with our game because, for whatever reason, it's unbalanced, it's not fun. But now hundreds of thousands of people have it. We can't roll it back. We can't delete it. So the most important thing for you as the developer is you have to hold on to that, right? And we do. So we tell everyone we hold on the right to, so you get to keep your metadata. You get your metadata of, okay, this does X, this does Y. But we have the right to nerf it or buff it depending on the status.
That's an interesting concept. To me, that requires a lot of forethought, because what you're going to do, a lot of, what a lot of, projects have done is they'll come out with, this NFT and here's the terms and conditions. And within that, if you change it, you've fundamentally gone against what you've already agreed to with a lot of your, your users and your owners of the NFTs. So, give a little advice to someone, say, who's interested in starting out a project. To me, I think the most important thing is to spend time sort of calculating that ahead of time. But what would be some of the things that you guys would suggest? Hey, look at this, really kind of put a keen eye to it and come up with a game plan before you come out. Because a lot of times people come out with your MVP, your minimum viable product, and here it is, and it could be NFTs. But talk about how important it is for that forethought so that you're not in the situation where now either we piss off our current owners or we don't have new people coming in and you're in that sort of quagmire. What do you do?
Yeah. So to clarify a bit there before I answer your full question is I would never touch the metadata of an item, right? So the way we phrase it, the way that it works for us is, let's say your item it has a attack stat of A class as an example, right? Like it's considered S tier. But S tier in our game, that interpretation of S tier into 5,000 damage, it could be 5,000, it could be 5,100, it could be 4,900, right? So you have to be able to retain that right to adjust the power level of these items and these characters relative to what's healthy for the game, right? Because the moment you start bouncing around price, your game's done. Like it just is done. So, but to answer your original question of, how do you give yourself that ability to make mistake? Which is why I'm a really big believer in seasonal mechanics. So we don't have the exact same seasonal mechanic in Sipher, but we'll have like a rotating season mechanic where your NFTs, they retain value and they have a core value, like a core power that's always there. But then on top of that, the power that comes on top of that, we change every season or we change every other season, right? So that it's fresh and we always have a chance to do something new. So you need to reserve the right to make changes. Like, because you're never going to get it right the first try, right? Nobody gets it right the first try. Even the best developers of any game, they patch stuff all the time, right? No game has existed and done well without being patched. So if you just hard commit to this is the product, and this is the exact features that you're going to get, you're in for such a bad time, because now instead of changing this original thing, you change everything else after that to work around the original thing. And that might not be a position you want to get yourself into. So what you should do is, let's say you're selling an NFT, right? Which I'm not sure how viable that is right now for game fundraising, but you should promise archetypes and general stuff. Let's say, I think that this is going to be the strongest character, and I think it's going to be a warrior, and I think it gets to do ABC, right? But you should never say it's going to have exactly this much stats, exactly this ability, exactly this feature, because that just it puts you in handcuffs. If that makes sense.
It does. And I think one maybe cool way of doing it is having like a functionality to aesthetic transition in between those seasons. Mm-hmm. So like popped into my head is, let's imagine that like Halo decided that I just played the campaign, so it's fresh on the mind, that the Brute Hammer was too OP and they got to get the Brute Hammer out of the game. Mm-hmm. But you could transition that to something aesthetic where the characters who had the Brute Hammer get a specific armor where they wear it on the back, but you can't pull it out during the game.
Yes.
So, and particularly is like, I think Dead Drop called them hideouts, but this concept's been touched on by a lot of Web3 games, where if you have a space to be able to like show all of your old weapons and still flex on them and be like, hey, I was in season 1 when we had that OP sniper, that was the season of the sniping. Like, I think there's some interesting ways to like still give them the feeling of ownership while staying to your point and making sure you don't end up with this crazy Frankenstein build with a bunch of different metas that you're trying to constantly like sort of reduce.
So I 100% agree with you. I think that it's already been a problem, and I think it's already been partially solved in Web2. Is, I'm not sure how much you guys know about like CCGs. Like, I'm not sure if you guys play like Magic the Gathering or like Hearthstone, or do you guys play any of that or no?
I haven't. I hopped off the TCG game with about Yu-Gi-Oh.
Okay, but basically, so CCGs, if you think about it, right, they're basically doing NFT drops. Every time they release new cards, they're basically releasing a new collection, right? So they run into this issue of, I've released 20 collections, and now all of the cards, they create this clusterfuck of combos that are impossible to balance and impossible to play. So what do? They say, okay, the cards from the year 2019 to 2022 can still be used in fun formats, or in like these what they're called like eternal formats, which like anything goes, we don't really balance it, right? And that's, you guys get to keep your ownership, you guys get to use these cards in these modes. But what we're going to balance, the product that we're going to maintain, is the NFT collections from year 2021 to 2024. So now instead of balancing for 10 years of cards that's just impossible for any human, right? You now only balance 3 years. And you basically keep rolling that window. So as the next year comes, you stop balancing the 2021 stuff and you start adding the new 2025 stuff. So I think that's one of the most sustainable ways to do it. It's been proven in Web2, and I think that's what Web3 games should do.
And you've been starting to see it in shooters because you've got like Call of Duty, for instance, has like ranked CDL playlist, which is super balanced and has like stripped down the amount of guns and weapons. And it's got its sort of regular playlist where anything goes, and then you've got Warzone. So you can even see that start to permeate in the rest of the gaming space.
Yeah. The biggest mistake for a Web3 game, the biggest mistake that I think a Web3 game can make is trying to make your product work in everything. Because now you have to balance it for everything. And that's just so hard. It's just an impossible task. You buff it in multiplayer, you nerf it in multiplayer, now it's still weak in single player, vice versa.
That's a fantastic point. And I think sort of niching down to what it is that you want to provide and what your, sort of main product is, I think is a really important concept there. And that's something where I would say that a game, even like Fortnite, that does really well, it knows that Battle Royale is its sort of bread and butter. So the Battle Royale balancing overarches everything else. Now you have other game modes, your creative and all the other things that you have where, those super overpowered items maybe that aren't available in Battle Royale could be available there. And you don't care in, like the red versus blue or, whatever game mode you're playing, but your core audience is where, they strive to make it. And, that is their most important concept. And I think that's something where a lot of games sort of miss that a little bit. Like you're talking about, just try to make everyone happy, which makes no one happy at the end. Right.
Yeah. I love that you use the Fortnite example because I have the best analogy to build off of that, which is if you remember a while back when Endgame was going crazy. They had, I'm not sure if you knew, but they had basically the Thanos gauntlet in game, right? If you could get the glove and go blast people with it, right? Now imagine if they sold that as an NFT and now they're just beholden to the people who bought it and they're like, you guys can't take this away now. So now that gauntlet is just permanently there for every iteration of Fortnite after that, and the balance has just gone out of whack. So what did they have to do if you're a Web3 game? When you sold the Thanos gauntlet, you should have said, I promise you this gauntlet will be usable for at least one season. And then after that, I may bring it in or out of rotation, but I make no promises and I am not committing to permanent use of this item in your game, right? So for us, we're committing to permanent use of the characters in the game, right? Because, we sold the characters can play, but the gear, the power, all that could change as the game evolves. So that's, I think, is that like you hit the nail on the head. You have to limit what it can be used for and just don't overpromise everything.
And that actually could create some interesting like player publisher dynamics as well. Like you may have an item that you say, okay, we really only want this around for this particular season. But players may actually love it so much that they make such a ruckus when you try to take it away. They're like, oh, bring back the gauntlet. Like that's really good feedback for you as a publisher too. And, it might spur some extra passions amongst the players, especially if they paid for it. It's an NFT and they want it forever. But still, it could be a good channel for feedback as well.
Yeah, but like in that case, it's always okay for me to tell you I'm going to give you this membership for 1 year and extend it to 5. It's never okay for me to tell you that you have a lifetime membership, but now I decided it's now 6 months, right? So you have to err on the side that makes people feel better, which is promising less or less amount of time, basically.
Yeah, as the great Charlie Munger used to say, the key to happiness is low expectations. I think you say the same thing.
Yeah, I wonder if a cool way to implement that, especially when they're doing the early NFT drops, there's a lot of like, I think Shrapnel did this where they had some legendary, some epic, some, rare and uncommon. So if you're going to refresh the items and the game mechanics every season, I wonder if that almost like the different ranks gives you access to like loot boxes or something at the beginning of the season where you can distribute, where like top tier gets, a legendary box, a rare box, an epic box, an uncommon box. And then as they go down, they get less and less boxes. And that way you have this like sort of baked in distribution mechanism. But I think, the expectation setting is a huge part of this. Like the Web3, there was a huge temptation, and companies were heavily rewarded in the early days for promising the moon and the stars and the whole solar system.
Yes,
And then most people didn't understand game dev and what it actually took to deliver that.
Yeah. So build off your Shrapnel example, right? Are the legendary drops in Shrapnel like objectively stronger, or are they skins only?
Oh, I was just using that as a mechanism and an example. Right now, it's just, to my knowledge, skins only. And then they have some dynamics of like if you hold a full set, etc.
So no, because I love bringing that up because the dynamic changes completely when it's cosmetic only versus power. When it's cosmetic only, you can release new cosmetics, and it's not really like, it's not that bad, right? Like CSGO, like if you know Counter-Strike, they release new skins all the time. They release new knife skins all the time. So those knife skins way back when, they still have value now, right? Which is the ideal. But because it's only cosmetic, it doesn't hurt anyone. Like, yes, it indirectly hurts me because now there are more knives and my knives are going down a bit, but fine, right? Okay. And they've set that expectation from the start. They've never said you were going to be the last knife ever released, right? But let's imagine for a moment that, let's say CSGO, let's say the knives did extra damage, right? Now it's problematic. Now it's, oh, you made a knife that's stronger than mine. All my value is being taken away. So for any economy where power is part of the monetary equation, the balancing and the expectations are completely different.
To move us into I guess more of a, not quite speculative, but more of an idea sort of realm, I'd love to get your opinion on, do you think it's possible, with all these mechanics we've been discussing being multiplayer based? I, again, just played through that Halo campaign, and I was just reminded of like how fun it is to play a single player game. Is it possible to make a Web3 ecosystem for a single player game, or do you need the multiplayer?
You can make a Web3 system for a single player game. The size of that market is just going to be infinitesimally small. Like, it's going to be, hey, I got this platinum trophy for completing my game, or I got my skin and now I'm going to give to you, but this skin is also farmable in your own game. And, and the problem with single player Web3 economies is most single player games, people expect them to be offline games, right? And the moment games are offline, and your game has any kind of monetary value in it, people are just going to bot it to death. The moment people realize, oh, your single player game has this skin that can get me $50, and all I need to do is hack the game and I get 50 skins, done. And now you're running into making a single player game that is always online, that has all these anti-cheat and all this stuff, but for what, right? Like, most people don't care. So now you've essentially hurt the normal Web2 experience for it, which is why, yes, basically, technically, yes, not really, no.
Yeah, so probably the realm that Web3 is going to interface with the single player games the most is the non-sexy, like sort of technology stuff, like sort of what Ultra's doing about actually being able to own the game, having it verified on the blockchain. Maybe some aesthetic stuff that like links to, if we do get that sort of overall metaverse that was promised in 2021, being able to have some assets that you could bring and flex online might be one potential path. But yeah, it's having focused so much on Web3 and loving single players like games so much, you do notice that they are a bit incompatible.
Yeah. So to maybe to cap off your last point, there is the difficulty with implementing Web3 as like a trading system, like in the way that like I bought this game CD, now I'll sell this game CD to you. The issue is just that digital files don't degrade, right? So like if you buy an Xbox CD, half of the people that bought the Xbox CD, they probably lost it, they broke it, they scratched it, whatever, and now you just got deflation. Your items are gone. But in the other scenario, the copies remain perfect. So now you're directly competing with the publisher who's still selling the game, and so the revenue, so the monetary question, the monetary equation for the publisher has changed. Will you make more money allowing secondary trading of your game that will essentially undercut you, and the product is exactly identical? And it's hard to sell that, right? Like, there's no reason for them to, because unless they make more money. But I don't see how they make more money doing it this way, which is why that route, I think, is very difficult.
Yeah, the two sort of ideas that come to mind is you'd either have to have like a royalty-based system, adopt sort of the NFT model where you're getting a small percentage of the transaction, or you go down a very dystopian, technologically cool like route, which is you do have it degrade extremely slowly. And when you sell the game, it's part of the EULA that this has like 100,000 gaming hours or something like that.
Yeah, but that's rough, right?
Yeah, that's icky.
That's rough.
Probably the former is the move. That's a little
Yeah.
bit more palatable.
Oops, sorry, I was muted there for a
No,
second.
no, go ahead.
But
Go
yeah,
ahead.
to scope out, maybe you could just talk about like crypto gaming a little bit more generally. I think we saw a really interesting phenomena where we all got super excited, just beyond excited in 2021. And then the chickens came home to roost, so to speak. And now we've kind of gotten to a place where, as far as to my knowledge, a lot of the funding from Web2 gaming has moved to Web3 gaming. All the people who got the funding back in 2021, they've all had time to really build out a really interesting, cool game loop, or at least they've had some time to build something. And so I think we're going to see a lot more products come to market. And yeah, I just think it's a really interesting time. Like the world is seems to potentially be ready for a more crypto centric existence. So maybe you could just talk about that in general of like, what are you seeing on the builder side, on the mass adoption side? And if you want to venture into the world of speculation on the price side too, definitely won't stop you.
Yeah. So from the builder side, right? I think that, and this is already happening, I think that Web3 games are so hard to make, and the majority of them will fail. And I'm not saying like we're one of the other ones, like we're talking about us, right? But like you're doing fundraising a different way. You need, and you need to have the Web2 experience to know how to runway your project, to have to have adequate runway to develop this game that you're selling. At the same time, selling a big enough vision where people will want to mint your product, unless like, or during a bull run or whatever it is. And then on top of that, on top of your game, you now have all of this additional Web3 complexity of trading, inflation, item economy, et cetera, et cetera. So you have so many moving parts already if you were doing a Web2 game, but now you have the additional Web3 layer on top, which is just why it's so difficult. Now, moving into like general development, right? So Web3, I think I saw recently some discourse about how some projects basically pivoted away from Web3 back into Web2, and there was some discourse about that. And I think that is like, I think that I get it for those people, because if you did a Web3 project expecting all of this liquidity and then you thought that like this is just like this valve that will keep feeding you, it's not. You need to get that initial boost of the Web3 project, and then you need to make a sustainable game economy. And no one has done this properly yet, right? Like no one has done it properly. In terms of price, so we moved away from, I would say that right now, actually no, I would say that right now we have not really moved away from hype cycle projects. What I mean by that is Web3 game projects are still, even as of last year, are still incentivized to do marketing and to do speculation over actual product, because that's still what gets you paid more, right? Like if you let people speculate on a token, you let people speculate on something, you just get so much more engagement. You just get so much more monetary value. That's still the play, especially if you want to secure a runway. And by doing it that way, you just don't have good products. So for the teams that are forced into that route, you can't expect good products. It's not going to work. For the teams that got runway secured, let's say 2021, and are now gradually building, if they did all those previous steps in, like, if they made a great game, if they budgeted their runway correctly, if they've now factored in the proper Web3, the Web3 economy, then I think they have a big chance of doing really well. But who's going to hit that? I don't know. Whether or not that's easy, I don't know. In terms of price, right? Like prices will go high as long as demand is there. So if your game just has enough players, if your game is truly good enough to where it got hundreds of thousands, or even more than that, then just intrinsically your rare skins, even if they're like a shit skin, it will have value. Because just by having more people in the game, there will be someone willing to pay $1,000, $500 just to show other people, hey, I have this stupid 2D image on my screen and you don't, haha. But you just need to get that amount of people in. And We don't have that yet, right? And that amount of people that play the game has to be real players. No one wants to flex to a bunch of gold farmers. So you need people who play the game and who actually have on some level wanna get that item, right?
And I was wondering if you could kind of talk about, what you think about, sort of content creators. And I don't know, that's not something we talk about a lot on
Oh
here,
yeah,
but
yeah. Yep.
some content creators like in the Web3 space, how to get them more engaged. And, to me, it's a really good indication that your game is being played and adopted by people who are not just farmers and not just bots, like they're
Mhm.
actually out there, doing something. Kind of talk about that and see how that space is evolving.
Yep. Um, I think we're being held back. As in, like, I think we're being held back because of it would be lovely if all of the Web3 game projects could talk to the majority of Web2 KOLs and have an open reception. But now, if let's say you're a significant Web2 KOL, would you ever touch a Web3 game with a 10-foot pole? Even if you like the game, even if you like the vision, even if you like the product, would you bother dealing with the, oh my God, so and so is supporting scams, so and so wants to rug their children, so and so wants to like, and like, yeah, so that's the issue. There's too much stigma around it right now, and there still hasn't been a game that shows it like, hey, we're doing Web3 properly. There's no rugging, there's no so and so. Until that stigma is overcome, you're basically pushing away a lot of normal Web2 gamers, and that's where your Web2 reaches, right? So now what you have left are either small Web2 creators, or you have medium to large Web3 creators. But medium to large Web3 creators have the same issues we discussed before, which is everything is about price. I will go show your game if your game has a token coming. I will show your game if there's something that I can give to my viewers, or my viewers can get something. And now you're back to the same problem as before. So I think we just need that one legitimate product where people are like, okay, like maybe it's not for me, but it's still a good product, and I see what the Web3 vision is, right? I don't think we're there yet. And until we move away from like games being focused around like a token drop, or something, some monetary value coming, it's hard to crack that KOL issue.
Yeah, I think we need that one product and also sort of that one cross, you know, key opinion leader, like
Yep.
to have the courage to say, look, I'm not getting paid. This game it's fun. Like come play it, and then do some, live demos of him playing it just like a Web 2 game, and then just let it catch on,
Mhm.
and hopefully that game doesn't have issues, where something happens with the economy or whatnot, and then, sort of if all those things happen like lightning striking, then I think we'll get there.
Yep. Yep. And I think I saw. Oh, sorry. I think I saw
No,
recently
please.
like FaZe Banks was like said like he's very pro crypto gaming. I could tell, right? But like he's FaZe Banks. He's very popular amongst the kids. And even then, so many people are like, "Bro, why are you promoting a scam?" And I'm not gonna fault those people for thinking that, right? We haven't had any good headlines come out of the Web3 space, so how can you fault people for speculating that?
Yeah, I tend to think it's not going to crack, like that nut's not going to crack until the audience demands it. So
Yep.
if you end up with an off the grid or something like that where people are legitimately hungry to watch that game get played, and I don't know
Mhm.
if off the grid is going to be that game, but that's sort of the golden child right now.
Mhm.
So something like that where, the audience of these streamers are like, hey, I want to watch you play this. But I know we're coming up on the top of the hour, and I know you've got a flight to catch. So do you have any closing thoughts around Sipher or anything else around gaming that you want to end with? Anything we didn't get a chance to talk about Sipher that you were hoping to?
No, I mean, so, first, once again, thank you guys for having me. I'm really proud of the product that we have. I do believe that we're one of the teams in Web3 that have really all in on the quality of the product. Like, we really tried to take a look at like a holistic view of how do you have organic Web3, how do you have organic sustainable economies, and how do you really develop content in a way that's sustainable, that gets more users, that retain users. And I would like to believe that currently, from the people we're talking to, for the people that I'm talking to at least, we're the ones that are taking up the biggest crack at that Web3, Web2 problem. So, but don't come look at the game because it's fun, right? Like, don't worry about like the NFTs and all that other stuff later. Play the game. If you like it, then have a look, have a look at a bit more of like what the economy is about, what the items, what the gear is about. But you need to like the game first, right? I don't like telling people to speculate on a game just because the game's gonna do well. You know, like I'm a gamer. I'm gonna tell you to play a game that's fun. So come try the game. If you like it, then I believe that we have one of the better shots at developing a really good Web3 and Web2 product.
Hell yeah. Love the sentiment. Ben, you want to take us out?
Yeah, I was about to say on that note, just want to thank you very much for coming on the show today and for sharing all about Sipher. Really appreciated it. Maybe we can give the people a call to action. How do they actually go and get their hands on something tangible, whether it be when it comes out in a couple of days or in the next year or so, and the next cohort of folks are getting onboarded.
Yes. So it's going to be very soon in the next month. You just need to follow at playcypher.com. So that's on Twitter, or, follow our Discord. But if you're not, everyone has like 50 different Discords nowadays. So just follow at playcypher, Sipher, Sipher, and we'll give you updates and you'll know what's happening.
Awesome. Really appreciate you. As always, super grateful for the greatest co-hosts of all time, Mr. Nick, Mr. Jared. You guys are the best. Thank you all very much. And for those watching and listening, thank you. Otherwise, we're just talking into the abyss of our computer. So thank you for listening, and we will see you on the next episode of Interlinked. Take care.